Hello, and welcome to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 deals with vocabulary building. It's an essential chapter for college students because having a strong vocabulary can help to determine your success. So let's take a moment and answer the 3 questions that you see on the screen right now. Which language do you think has the most words? Which language is used most in international communication? What language is spoken by most people? So what was your guess? Which language has the most words? The answer to that is English. According to the Global Language Monitor, English has 1,025,109.8 words. I'm not sure how you get a .8 word, but nonetheless, we by far have the most words in our language. And any of you who may have learned English as a second language can attest to that. It seems like we have so many words that say approximately the same thing. So, which language is used most in international communication? Once again, it's English. Even though you may think in your future career you'll never, have to speak anything other than English, it's highly likely that you will interact with people from other countries as you perform your job. It's amazing how the internet has shrunk our world. Many people have jobs now that never would they have thought that they would be conversing with people in other cultures, and yet they are now doing so on a regular basis. What language is spoken by the most people? By this time you're probably ready to say English again, but actually it's Mandarin Chinese, followed closely by a second place English. So English is a dominant force in the world. Now, of extreme importance to you is academic vocabulary. These are the words that you need to be able to have at your fingertips in order to succeed in college. With over 1 million words in the English language, each of you will encounter specialized vocabulary in the various courses that you take. And so as a result, you need to have a strong vocabulary in order to write papers, give presentations, create meaningful PowerPoint and other media messages. Another thing that you'll need is the ability to have a command of adjectives at your fingertips. One of the most popular questions right now in interviewing is, and it often occurs near the end of the interview, is to ask the candidate to describe him or herself with the 3 words that colleagues at previous jobs would have used. If you only have a few words to describe yourself at your disposal, you'll come off as not as quite an exceptional candidate as some of the other people who have a wide variety of adjectives that they can access. This particular link right here, which I have included on a separate handout, takes you to a blog that has 130 of the most powerful words that you can use in an interview. It's probably a good resource for you to bookmark for some future job interview. And then finally, it's true, people tend to make judgments about you, about all of us, based on the language that we use. Again, if we aren't able to pull out, academic sounding language, our instructors, our future employers will think us to be probably less of a candidate than some others. So acquiring vocabulary is an important skill. So how many words do you own? Well, actually there's an activity that you'll do this week that will give you an approximation of how many English words you have at your disposal. The quiz is an interesting one, because you'll be able to sort of put yourself in a frame of reference with other folks in terms of those 1 million plus words that we have in the English language. Basically, we all get by on a daily basis with a core vocabulary of just a few hundred words. And then we have a fringe vocabulary with several hundred more words. These fringe vocabulary words include vocabulary that you are learning in your various classes. You probably don't use them in everyday conversation, but when it's time to write a paper or when it's time to discuss a philosophy or a principle in another class, you're able to access this fringe language that you also possess. And then, of course, we all have many, many, many words that are unknown to us. Many of the words that we use in the English language today came to us from either the German language or from the French. What happened is that many, many years ago, the French conquered the Germans in England. And when that happens, when a war is won, you may have heard the expression, "To the victor goes the spoils." Simply means that whoever wins the battle usually gets the good stuff being the wealth of the country, the control of the political system, and often the vocabulary of that country is elevated to whomever won the battle. Well, that's what happened, is that the French won the battle in Germany, and so as a result, their language was deemed to be more elevated, to be a higher class language than the people who lost, being the Germans. And so French became used in all the different government capacities, in academia, all the colleges and universities. French was considered to be the best language, while Germanic language was sort of thought to be sort of second class. Now, French is a Romance language. It comes originally from Latin, and so a lot of the words that we use today actually have Latin origins. Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Romansh, which is a Swiss language, also are called Romance languages, having very deep roots in Latin. Now, if you don't read much, then most of your word usage will come from the Germanic languages, not the language of academia. Reading is the best way to develop vocabulary. There is no better substitute. So what do Germanic words sound like? Well, in everyday speech, we might say that we had a good time at the party, or that when we got a call from a telemarketer, we gave them a fake name, or you could talk about your cousin who is very talkative. That's everyday common language, but not the language that you want to use necessarily when you're writing a paper for a class, when you're trying to impress the reader with your ability to use the language of academia. So academic writing might draw more again from the French with its Latin and Greek origins. Instead of saying good, we might say beneficial. We might say, instead of a fake name, we might say pseudonym. I think pseudo is one of your vocabulary word parts this week. It means fake, and you can see that the NYM would be a root word for name, so a fake name. Instead of saying talkative, you might say loquacious. Now, would you walk up to someone in the hallway and say, "Oh, my goodness, you should have been at the party. Ted was so loquacious"? No, you probably wouldn't. But if you're trying to write a paper and describe a character who talks ceaselessly, then loquacious might be a good word to use. So we have a lot of academic words that have Latin and Greek origins, and if you know word parts, it can help you to quickly figure out the meaning of words. That's the reason why we do word work every week. My hope is to equip you with some basic word parts, the most common ones used, so that you'll be able to read without having to interrupt yourself to constantly look words up in the dictionary, whether it be in paper or online. We also know that there's specialized language that occurs in most disciplines. I don't know what classes each one of you are taking this semester, but no matter what content area you are in, there's a certain set of vocabulary that's used in that content area with specific meanings. If you take a look on page 67, which I'll give you time to just grab your book and turn to page 67 if you would. Toward the bottom of page 67, you'll see that there is an article on the hindbrain. Can you identify ways that they used hindbrain to stand out in this particular reading? You should be able to find 3 pretty easily, and there are actually more. Well, for one thing, they use the word hindbrained as a title, and so that we know makes it an important word. We see that the word hindbrain is used twice in the opening paragraph. Repetition of a word usually should call it to our attention, being one that we'll need to know the meaning of. They called the definition of the hindbrained parts over into the margin and defined each of the parts. They used boldface print for all of the key vocabulary as well. And so that also tells us that hindbrain is a word that we better know. Now that would be a specialized vocabulary word in some type of a health class or an anatomy class. But there are also sometimes when just common, ordinary, everyday words are used in specialized ways in academic classes. So for instance, in growth, in biology, we can assume that it means, an addition of weight, it means an addition of height, other dimensions. But in growth, when we're in an economics class, means something totally different, usually used with economic growth. And if you're taking a class on understanding viewership, growth would refer to an increase in the number of viewers that are watching any particular program or viewing a particular ad. And so even common, ordinary, everyday words sometimes take on a very specialized meaning. Now there are tons of online dictionaries out there that can help you develop vocabulary in the courses that you're taking. Let's see if some of these links will come up. If not, I've provided them in a handout for you. Not that one. Here's an example of a biology online dictionary where you can type in any word that you might want to know and find the answer for it. They also have words broken down into different categories so that you can see all the vocabulary terms that are associated with each of the areas. This is a really helpful tool for us as we look through, our glossaries. Sometimes glossaries in textbooks can be pretty poorly put together, and so having access to online dictionaries for the courses that you're taking is a very good idea. You might even ask your instructor if there are particular online sources that he or she would recommend. There's also, in addition to the special words that we use in each one of our classes, there's also what we consider to be sort of the general academic vocabulary that all students entering college should have at their fingertips. And so researchers have compiled a large list of words that all students should know when they're studying in college. And this particular academic word list is a great one for you to read over. You can put it as an app on your phone, so if you have bus rides at all, you'll have something to amuse yourself with. But you should, as a college student, be familiar with all of these, what they call 570 head words. And then as you add on different forms of each of the head words, it ends up being about 3,000 words altogether. And so, take a look at this. It's a very wonderful tool. For instance, here they give you the head word abandon, and then they give you different forms of that word. And then over to the side here, if you want, you can have the definition of the word. And every time you click on that, it's a live link, and it'll give you the definition or a variety of meanings that word can have. Let's see. two clues to an academic vocabulary word when you're reading in your textbook is that the definition follows the word. If it does, it's worth noting, or that the word appears frequently in use as you're reading that particular chapter. So what can you do to equip yourself so that you really get a handle on these academic words that you need to know, as well as specialized vocabulary for each of your classes? Well, there's probably no better tool than to employ some note cards. It has been a strategy that I'm sure many of you have used, and it is an excellent one. By simply writing the vocabulary term on one side of the card and the definition on the back, you have a built-in review system going. You can read through the cards in terms of the terms and then see if you can say out loud the definition of that term, flip it over, check yourself, and then for an extra challenge, read the definitions and then see if you can identify which vocabulary word is being defined. Using those cards is an incredible help, but some people prefer to have things available online. And so if manipulatives are not something that are necessarily part of your learning style, you might consider a site like Study Blue or Cram. Each of these sites offers you the opportunity to build online cards for your review. And again, you can then access them from your phone anytime that you're out and about and have a few minutes to spare, whenever you're waiting for a class or a bus or anything that might be coming up in your life. These aids will really help you to master the vocabulary in each of your courses. There's also an assignment that you'll be doing that deals with recall cues that we use to help us master vocabulary words. Now, for instance, I'm going to take that example of hindbrain that we looked at before in our textbook, and I went out to google.com and I found an image of it. So sometimes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. We've heard that expression. And sometimes having a picture of a vocabulary word that we're trying to master is also a good idea. You see, words are stored in one part of our brain, but images are stored in a different part of the brain. So if you have both the words and an image stored for a vocabulary word, you have twice the capacity to access the definition for that word. Another strategy that is very helpful is to come up with a word that means the opposite of the vocabulary word that you're studying. So in the example here, I have that the hindbrain is at the opposite end of the forebrain. So anything that you can do to create a contrast will also deepen the neural connection that you're creating to the word and its original meaning. And that concludes this part of the video overview for Chapter 2. This is Part 1. More parts to follow.